Hey, what's going on, everybody? We're going to do one more review today, and that is going to be of The Stand by Stephen King. This is the complete and uncut version, as in they added 150,000 words that were cut out in the initial book that they released. So this is 1,153 pages. There are a lot of people. I did a discussion in a Reddit book forum that I'm in, talking about The Stand, and I really enjoyed it. And there are a lot of people online or YouTube, anywhere, that like talk about how long the book is. They say it's too long, it's bloated, there should be stuff cut. I feel like a part of the charm of this book is the detail, especially since Stephen King was going for a Lord of the Rings style type of book, kind of trying to go Tolkien-esque, the journey through the United States and things like that. He was just really trying to go for a long book. You could argue that this could be split into several books, and he could have done a different ending. But considering it's more something else I saw, and I just recently watched a review, and I'm trying to remain critical of the book because I personally really enjoyed it. But I could see some of the points, and I see that like some points are valid about the book, but I feel like some people are looking at the book in the wrong way. I think a lot of the times the book is looked at as a horror novel because Stephen King typically writes horror novels like Salem's Lot or The Shining or It. Those are horror novels. But I mean, if you've seen any of the interviews by Stephen King or some interviews, often he'll say he's a suspense writer, which I feel like that categorizes this book a lot better than saying it's a horror novel. And if you go into this novel expecting a lot of horror, I feel like you'd be sorely disappointed. But I feel like the suspense aspect of the novel is very much there. And I feel like if you approach the book in that way, it's very good. Additionally, I feel like if you try to read this straight through and you don't give it time to breathe, it's going to feel like a drudge, like you're just dragging along through the novel. But I feel like it's better to treat it like what it is. It's a very large novel, so kind of take your time with it and let it digest and unfold. There are a lot of characters in the book. There are a lot of different characters. And again, because they're so detailed, I feel like that is one of the benefits, or one of the great things about the book, is that the characters are so well developed. So I saw, again, another reviewer talking about how some of the characters were just didn't feel, well, here's what this guy said, which I respect criticism of authors. I think it's smart to be critical of authors' writings because nothing is perfect. But he said that Stephen King looked at his characters as below him and sort of made fun of some of his characters or wrote them as if they were beneath him. I really don't agree with this comparison. I think a lot of the characters in the book are just written as if they were other people because authors draw upon their own experience, but a lot of the characters, at least from what I've written, are developed based on other people, or people I've observed, or just an amalgamation of what I would expect a character I'm writing to be like. I don't necessarily think that he's being disrespectful of these characters. I think he's just writing them as he imagines them. But again, that's just my perspective of the characters of the novel, and I guess you could make that argument with some of the characters because they're just obscure or unlikable, but I really wouldn't. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with. Okay, so I've heard this several times. So a lot of people don't like the ending of the book, and I guess I can understand that because it is kind of an abrupt ending. Again, before I start talking about the major portions of the book, I'm going to go ahead and preface there are going to be spoilers in this video. I'm not going to hold punches. I would read the book first, or if you don't care about spoilers, then just continue on. But at the end, everybody blows up. That's what happens. So the trash can man, who is kind of an obscure but very cool character in the book, is kind of he's a pyromaniac, and towards the end, he's searching for different weapons, and he ends up finding I think it's an atomic bomb. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's an atomic bomb. It's some kind of huge bomb at the very least, and it blows up all of Las Vegas and kills all of the people. I think it's in the West. Don't hold me on that, but it's the characters that are supporting the adversary or the evil person of Randall Flagg is the character, the dark man, tall man, walking dude. Those are the several names that he's referenced to in the book, but everybody's blown up, and including two very, very cool characters that I really enjoyed in the book, Larry Underwood and Glenn Bateman. And that was kind of emotional kind of an emotional scene for me because I really liked those characters. But a lot of people argue that the ending was very abrupt, and I think it's ironic that people call the ending abrupt when it's such a long book. It's like 1,100 pages, and in my opinion, for something that's like a suspense novel or a thriller, it seems appropriate to end it with like a bang. But I suppose if he was trying to write more like Lord of the Rings, then he could have extended this and made it into like 3 separate novels rather than one massive novel. And then I feel like more people would have been appeased and appreciative of like an ending where the two parties actually went to war and there was, I don't know, more bloodshed or horrific things, maybe like torture in between the war, and like have it span over like maybe several years or something like that. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like it was a pretty decent ending. I can understand again that it was like sort of abrupt and it could have been done in a different way, but based upon like it being a suspense novel and supposed to be, you know, kind of thrilling for the reader, it kind of makes sense to me that it would end like that. But I suppose that's just my opinion. I think people were very, very critical of it. I think if you look at the the good aspects of the book, you might understand more so why it is so like, it might not be as widely enjoyed as I think it is, but I mean, you might understand why I enjoyed it a little bit better than some people out there. I think a lot of the trepidation from the book is because it's so long, they feel like they've been cheated by the ending. But I think part of the problem with that too is, I guess the ending is a little bit abrupt, but a lot of people were expecting like a horror novel out of this book. And I wouldn't call this a horror novel. I would call it a suspense novel. And because it's long and because there's so many things that happen that are, you know, build up the characters and explain their motives and things like that and like their backstory, I feel like it just builds more so into that suspense. And I really enjoyed it. But, well, I suppose I could agree that the ending was a little bit abrupt, but it's just, in my opinion, it seemed like an appropriate way to end the novel. But if you're expecting something that's going to be more of a satisfying ending, then that might not be as satisfying as you would wish it to be. But it's just very ironic to me that like so many people are like, oh well, it's too long, we need to cut all this out, and then they say the ending is too abrupt, as in the author should have expatiated more and done a different ending. But in my opinion, if he were to do it in a different way, where the war continued and he had a different ending, where there's more torture, and then the I don't know, Lloyd Henry was eventually killed by, I don't know, a spy or someone, or just in battle or something like that, then it would need to be expanded into several books, which is the opposite of what people are criticizing. But it's interesting too, because I'm like, well, there are interviews. I started to talk about this earlier, but I didn't finish my thought. There are interviews of King talking about The Stand, and he was talking about how it got overwhelming, the amount of characters in the book, and he kind of had a revelation while walking and thinking that he could just end the story with an explosion. And perhaps that's why people don't like the ending, because rather than like sticking it out and perhaps finding a different ending that would be more satisfying and a better conclusion to such a long novel, he just ended it with an explosion. But in my opinion, as far as King's writing style, and again, the type of book that it is, it seems like this is a fair ending. I mean, not fair to the characters, but it doesn't seem as bad of an ending as some people make it out to be. But again, that's my opinion. if it were to be done any differently, like I said, I would want it to be spaced out between 3 different books, and then that way there might not be as much hatred over the length and the ending. And additionally, I would have the ending. If I were to write it, I would have written it probably to where they actually went to war, and there were more, I don't know, horrific events that happened during the war. But again, I didn't write the book, and considering the amount of characters and how long the book already was, I can understand why the author decided to end it like that. But again, a lot of people just like hate on the book, and like it's funny because like I see a lot of people, they praise like the idea, but they hate the execution towards the end of the novel. And I'm not going to be completely supportive of everything that happened in the book. I'm going to be a little critical right now. So something that Stephen King does, I've seen in at least 2 books of his, is he uses a lot of magic realism inspired from Christianity and religion, which, in my opinion, I think it's interesting. I think it's a good way to convey magic so that it feels real to people that that happen to be Christians or believe in God, or I don't know, maybe they're agnostic or whatever. But I think it's a good way to convey like a reality behind magic and like, you know, make the reader believe it. But I do think there was one criticism. I can't remember. I might link the 2 reviews. I might not. I don't really want to. I don't want to be too critical of other people's reviews, because I understand from like, if you're looking at this book as in it's a piece of literary American history, then yeah, you could be a little bit critical about the ending. But I guess he did say this too. Is he said if you're reading it as a source of like entertainment, then you might not be as critical. But anyways, there is a lot of like Christianity symbolism type things in the book, and Mother Abigail, I think, was a very interesting character because she's like the hand of God, or like she's like the prophet that brings about the the end of the book where the good guys win. But I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of her character. I thought it was, again, there was another book reviewer here on YouTube that pointed out that they're not really even characters per se, like Randall Flagg and Mother Abigail. They're more like symbols. They're like a symbol of God and good, and then Randall Flagg is like a symbol of like the Antichrist or the adversary or devil or evil. And I think that's a very good point. I think that is probably something that could have been done a little bit better. I think it was played too much into those aspects of good versus evil, but I think that's what the book is. It's a story of good versus evil, and I think that's what the book is. It's not. It's a story of good versus evil. I think it's a suspense novel. It's not a horror novel. I think that's a big part of the problem behind a lot of the criticism is it's looked at as a horror novel, and they feel the ending is like cheating the reader because it's such a long book. But if you look at it as a suspense novel that has very, very in-depth and creative characters, then I feel like it doesn't feel as I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. I feel like there's a lot of hate on this book, possibly because it's just so long, but I'm 100% because it's so long. I feel like people don't like that they sat through so long just for it to be blown up. But once again, I told you how I would do it if it was me writing this. I would have done it more. I would have played more into the inspiration from Lord of the Rings, and I would have done it over several books and have it end in like a large war, and then eventually societies are starting to like be built back like he has in the book. And I think, again, a lot of people, they talk about the great concept, and the concept is great. I think what's really cool about the concept of the book is how predictive it was, or foreshadowing it was, of the pandemic, and like how many similar aspects there were. I'm pretty sure in the book it says somewhere something about like stop the spread, which is really interesting. And then it kind of makes you think, like, what would the government response actually be to like something that killed like 99% of the population? Like, how accurate is it? Would the government try to cover that up? You really don't know, but I think it was probably pretty accurate to what would happen if something like that was released. Something really interesting that I didn't catch this when I was reading through it, but I was looking through the Wikipedia on the stand and some summaries, and it was talking about General Starkey, and apparently the contingency plan was to release the virus in the Eastern Bloc, which is Eastern and Central Europe, then Asia, Africa, and Latin America, to like prevent the communist like portions of the world from like continuing on while the United States is like falling to the virus, which disgusting, but feels very, very accurate to what would actually happen if something like that got leaked out and was killing 99% of the population. I mean, you would hope nothing like that would happen, but it doesn't seem too far off from what a government response would actually look like. And we'll talk about the beginning of the book first, because this is the beginning of the book is the part that people enjoy the most, from what I've seen from the critics of it. But and I can understand the criticism of the end. I think as I'm thinking about it more, it is kind of abrupt and it could have been done differently. But I feel like by the time he had written 11 or 1200 pages, it was just a burden. So he just decided to end it with an explosion. And regardless of what you think of the ending, I think the good parts of the book are the characters and, again, the idea. I think the idea is great. I think the characters are great. I think what again part of the problem is someone said it was like kind of meandering, like it goes along and it doesn't really seem like Stephen King knows where he's going to end the book. I think that's exactly right, because that's Stephen King's writing style. He's discussed it in interviews before that it's called a pantser. So like you write by the seat of your pants. You don't use an outline. You just kind of see where the characters take you, and that's what happens in the end of the book too. I feel like a lot of people don't like that. They don't like that there wasn't some plan for how the book was going to end. It just ended abruptly. But I mean, to a degree, it's like more natural from like it's like more of like a stream of conscious type of book. And I feel, again, that's probably part of the problem people have with it when they say like verbal. I think someone said like verbal diarrhea or something like that. A lot of word garbage or whatever. Just a significant amount of detail thrown into the book that is unnecessary, that could be cut out. Which, if that's the case for you, I feel like you should just read the abridged version, because it takes out like 300 or 400 pages of the book. But I mean, if you want that extra explanation of the characters, I feel like that's the point of the uncut and abridged version. But a lot of people criticize him for that, because they say, well, he's just going to publish whatever he wants because he's such a successful author, so it could be hot garbage and he's still going to put it out. But I happen to disagree. But we'll talk a little bit more about the beginning of the book. We'll talk about the virus. It's called Captain Trips, which I thought was a really cool name, cooked up for the virus. I think like the rebellions from like some of the college students against like the soldiers and the troops, or like the police and stuff. I don't think it's police, but I think it's like at least the soldiers that are like, you know, holding down the fort from the people that have like realized that the government is trying to put down protests and disguise the virus. I think that's really cool part of the book. I think it's really cool, like, that it shows that people. I feel like the response from Americans is very accurate. I don't. Again, they talked a lot about the Americana in the book, and I think that's very cool. There's definitely a lot of Americana in the book. At one point, there's Jim Morrison. They're like I think it's like Randall Flagg that they're talking about, but apparently looks like Jim Morrison that Stu Redman saw at like a gas station, and I was like, that's cool. That's a really cool reference. But anyways, yeah, a lot of the characters and the things in the book are very American. I think that's again part of the charm of the book. I think I watched a review from a guy who is, I guess, a teacher of philosophy. I don't know if he was a professor or what, but he was talking about the points in the book where they're talking about rebuilding society, what would happen since all this military equipment and was lying around and someone needs to regain control. I definitely think that was very interesting as well, how they went about rebuilding society. But again, if it were to be done a different way, then it could be expanded over several books, and that could be expatiated upon more. But I feel like people already think it's too long. How would they think if it was over the course of like a trilogy, or more like a series of like, you know, like the Dark Tower? And it's interesting too, because the Dark Tower has some pretty long books in there, but I haven't gone into too many reviews of the Dark Tower because I haven't finished it. I'm on 4.5 out of I think it's 7 books, but there's not as much criticism of it being long because it's over the course of several books. And another like comparison you could make for like to the length of this book is like I don't know, any number of series like In Search of Lost Time, which I've only read the first book of that as well, or Harry Potter. All of those are extremely long. They're just over the course of several books. So I don't really understand as much of the criticism over being long. If it's too long, read the abridged version. That's what I would say. But I do understand the criticism over the ending, I suppose. We'll talk about some of the characters that are in the book. My favorite character in the book is Larry Underwood. I thought he was really well written, and I think he was really cool because although he was like a good character in the end, a lot of like he does things that are like, questionable or not necessarily good, and he's not necessarily like a perfectly good human being. But and it just shows like it displays him as a real character, and like you know, he's not a perfect person, and I think that's the majority of the characters in the book obviously aren't perfect, and that's kind of part of the charm of the characters. Harold Lauder, I think, is a very interesting character, and I talked about the novel being a suspense novel and not a horror novel. I feel like Harold Lauder is a very important supporter of this, like a character that exemplifies that it's a suspense novel and not a horror novel, in my opinion. So Harold Lauder, he's an interesting character. He's kind of made to be disliked, but at the same time, you're sort of rooting for him to actually make the correct decisions. So although he's kind of like, you know, pining over Franny or Frances because she is this he fell in love with her while they were traveling to find other people and figure out what's going on, like why everybody's dead in their town. But eventually she falls in love with Stuart Redman, and Harold Lauder gets all mad because he feels like that she's like his property, basically, which is repulsive. And again, he's like fat and like morose and vengeful. But I mean, it gets to a point where like he could have made the right decision rather than like helping Nadine Cross, or rather than trying to overthrow the new political society they've made in the Free Zone, and you kind of want him to do that. And the suspense is built because he makes the wrong decision. It's because like you're like reading and you're hoping that he will actually make a good decision, but even though you know it's likely that he will make the wrong one. And I feel like that his character really builds that suspense throughout the novel, and really adds a layer of depth to him. And for that reason, I think he's really interesting and good character. But he's definitely very unlikable. I thought Nick Andrews was very cool as well. That was probably my second character. I think my second favorite character. He's probably tied with Stuart Redman for me. And then I really liked Glenn Bateman as well, but he'd probably be behind the three I just mentioned. Larry Underwood, Nick Andros, and Sue Redman, then Glenn Bateman, and then, yeah. I like the Trash Can Man, too. I thought he was an interesting character. The kid was interesting as well. I think I saw someone, like, talking about, like, the scene where he, like, rapes, like, the Trash Can Man, which was kind of graphic, and it's kind of horrifying. It's a little, again, I don't think this is a horror novel. I think that's a wrong, like, again, the review I was just watching that was very negative towards the book, which, again, I don't have any problem with negative reviews. If you don't like it or you have criticisms of it, then more power to you. And I'm trying to put as many criticisms as I can forward, because I don't want to be completely positive about the book, because obviously nothing is perfect. But anyways, that's kind of a horrific scene that's in the book. But I do see the point that there's not a lot of horror in the book. I think it's kind of interesting when the kid is like torn to pieces by her, like he's like trapped in the car, and eventually he gets eaten by the wolves. I think that's an interesting part of the book. I think Randall Flagg, so someone else in another review made this same comparison, but I thought about this before I watched the review, so I'm not like stealing this idea from someone, but I thought when I was reading about Randall Flagg that he reminded me of Walter from the Dark Tower series. And also I found out that Randall Flagg appears in the Dark Tower series somewhere. I don't think I've encountered him in the Dark Tower series yet, or I may have. I just didn't realize it. But apparently, he's in several other of King's books with RF, the initials RF, instead of Randall Flagg, and he's just a figure that appears over and over again in his books, which I thought was really interesting. This other reviewer, he was talking about the scene where Nadine Cross goes to meet Randall Flagg, and it's been like she's been trying to get to the Dark Man throughout the entire book, except for like the one time when she thought she was gonna go with Larry Underwood, and he denies her. But the scene where he is basically rapes Nadine Cross, it's supposed to be like depicting like what it would be like if a demon were to have sex with like a human woman. And it's interesting too, because that same like scene of like a demon raping a human being, it's displayed in the third book in the Dark Tower series as well, the drawing of the three. I remember that specifically because I read it when I was younger, but I thought that scene was very it's vivid and kind of horrific. I would, obviously being raped by a demon would be horrific, but I think he said that was probably one of the most horrific scenes in this book, considering it's not very horror-esque. I would say this is a suspense novel. I know I've said that several times, but I feel like a big part of the problem with people that don't enjoy this book is they're not approaching it as a book that's trying to, really draw out the backstories and the emotions of these characters and build them up as real people, as if they were real people. And because of that, I feel like a lot of people don't like it. Again, yeah, it is long, but why would you pick up the book in the first place if you didn't want to read a long book? If you look at something like this and you're expecting something to be short, then that's not, obviously it's huge. It's a very big book, but okay. I'm going to try to be a little bit more critical of it. I think the ending, it definitely was abrupt, but King has spoken about it. It was obviously a kind of an abrupt decision because the characters were weighing on him too much, I suppose, and he just decided to end it. And I do agree, it is long in that it could have been done with some cuts, but if you're wanting more writing and more just more writing from Stephen King, then I would read the uncut version. If you want less, then I would try the unabridged version or the abridged version. But yeah, if I had written it, I would have done it differently. I probably would have had an actual all-out battle, and then maybe like some chemical warfare, because like some of the stuff is like sort of hinted at through the book that they're actually going to have a big war between the two societies, and almost like it would actually play out over a longer span of pages. Again, like several books is what I would have done it as, but I do think it's unfair to just say the ending is terrible. Considering it's like a suspense novel, then it has to end at some point. The suspense has to build up to something, and the explosion is what it builds up to, I suppose. And I think it is kind of gut-wrenching that it kills like two very cool characters, but yeah, I don't know. I understand that some people don't like it because of that. I've been talking too much about the criticisms of the book. We're going to talk a little bit more about what I liked about it. So Lloyd Henreid, he's on the adversary side, Randall Flagg side, or the evil side rather than the free zone. And he actually goes into the jail before everything happens because he was on like a killing spree with it's like Andrew Polk, and because of this killing spree, he eventually like is let out by Randall Flagg, but this is after he's like cannibalized the inmate in the next cell, which that's pretty horrific too. I think that scene was very well written. Let's see what else. I think the death of Rita Blakemore. So Rita Blakemore was with Larry Underwood when he was in not Las Vegas, but New York, and they had to escape through the Lincoln Tunnel, and he was originally going by himself because he had left her behind because he was like getting annoyed with her basically. But she dies from like overdosing on like I'm not sure if it's pain pills or what, but and that was kind of an interesting scene. And then he continues on, and I think part of like the inspiration from Lord of the Rings can be seen in like the traveling across the country the characters do, which I think is really really cool part of the book. I thought Stuart Redmond was a very cool part of the book as well, and I like that he sort of stands up to Harold Lauder and like doesn't let him like just like make claim over Franny. I think that's it's kind of a horrific portion of the book. And it talks about that a little bit, about the roles of just like women in society being less like concrete, because it's like a Wild West sort of like apocalyptic anarchist type of world where the laws have changed, and the rights of women could be like taken away just based on the strength of another group of people or men or whatever. But and again, another reviewer talked about that, and I thought that was an interesting observation. Let's see. I think Tom Cullen was an interesting character. Someone compared, like another reviewer compared Tom Cullen to Of Mice and Men. I thought that was a very good comparison. I think he was an interesting character. I think it was interesting to try to describe how a deaf mute person like Nick Andros would explain the situation that they're in to someone who is not like fully there mentally. So I thought that was very interesting as well. But yeah, I think again, I can see the opinions that people have of the book, because the entrance, the first part of the book is very good. So I agree with that, and I can agree that it kind of tapers off and takes a different direction towards the end of the book. I just don't necessarily think it's a bad direction. I think I do have issue with some of the Mother Abigail stuff, because I do feel like that it was a fair assessment, that she's more of like a symbol rather than a character. It's just supposed to be, this is the symbol of good, Randall Flagg is a symbol of evil. And I think that was a very good observation. And again, I think the fantastical elements definitely uptick in the second part of the book, but again, I don't think that's necessarily bad. I think an interesting scene is when Nadine Cross like offers herself to like Harold Lauder if he'll help him, basically like blow up a few of the people in the free zone and then come with her to Las Vegas. And I think it's really interesting that she eventually just like left him to die, and then she was almost killed because it's showing like a waning in Randall Flagg's powers. But okay, yeah, we'll give a rating, and then I'll talk about why I'm giving this rating. So I want to be fair. I don't want to be in my book reviews. I feel like sometimes I can be a little bit overzealous to be positive about the book because I've read it and I thought it was good, right? So I did read this and I did think it was good, but I can see the points that people have made critically, and I want to observe, like I want to be fair to those points. So I do think the ending could have been done differently. I probably would have done it differently, especially if I've written this much at this point. I would have probably spaced it out into several novels, or it's a series of novels, and I would have done a different ending. And that's probably one point against it. The magic realism portion, where they really play upon the Christian aspect of it, it is kind of like a Christian story in the end, but more so, in my opinion, I do feel like he plays upon that, but more so I feel like it's a story of good versus evil, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is a little simplistic, and maybe that's an issue that the other book reviewer took with it. So I could see that. I could see the theme of the book, or the I don't know, it's a little bit simplistic, but I think it was still very good. I think the character description and the depth of the characters is very, very good. I definitely don't agree that the characters were written beneath King. I feel like he just writes characters that come to his mind. I don't really feel like he wrote them as if they were beneath him. I mean, I guess you could make that point with like someone like Harold Lauder, but I mean, his character is written to be unlikable. So, and again, I feel like it would be hard to like not write characters at least somewhat like they were creations of your mind. So that might have been done like unintentionally, but I didn't really catch that. So maybe it is a fair criticism, but it's not something that I saw when I was writing it. I think a point can be made of that about Harold Lauder, but that's probably the extent, in my opinion. Again, overall, I think the idea was great. I think the premonition or the prediction of a wide-scale pandemic and the comparisons between the massive, scale of the disease virus was very interesting and very insightful to what an actual pandemic would be like, since we just went through one not too long ago. So I thought that was very intuitive, and I thought it was very cool. And I think it really makes you think, like, again, what the government response would actually be and how close Stephen King actually got to this. There was one quote in the book, if I can find it real quick, I'll go over, that I really enjoyed. And it was kind of talking about addiction, like Larry Underwood's addiction to drugs at the time, or while he was addicted. And I think it's kind of reflective of Stephen King's experience with drugs, because I know he was addicted to cocaine and then alcohol at one point. So I thought that was really a cool portion of the book that he added that into like a character. There's another character too in the Dark Tower series. It's Eddie. who has an addiction to heroin, which I don't think Stephen King was ever addicted to heroin, but I think it's interesting that he's written about that so much. But so here is the quote that I was talking about. So he said, "He's come out the other side. That was all. No one can tell what goes on in between the person you were and the person you become. No one can chart that blue and lonely section of hell. There are no maps of the change. You just come out the other side." I thought that was a really cool quote about change and about like overcoming addiction. I think it's just very, very like literary and cool quote. And yeah, I thought it was really good. I don't. Okay. So we'll go ahead and give it a rating. I'm gonna say 7.5 out of 10. The reason why I say 7.5 out of 10 is because I think the ending could have been done differently. I think it definitely plays into the good and evil aspect a little bit too much. I think, not even that, I think the character Mother Abigail is a little bit too close to like just a symbol of good, and it could have been done differently than that. But I don't necessarily think it's bad like writing or anything. I feel like some people are a little bit overcritical of it, but I think people are overcritical because they're criticizing King just writing too much and publishing it. But I think because of the development of the characters, and also I have an opinion of books that, especially long books, that kind of like goes against the general opinion, I would say. So most people think brevity and writing short and concisely and conveying information as, minusculely as possible is what you should do in writing. That's like the best thing you can do. But some of the best writing I've read is very descriptive and very, very in-depth. And I feel like that's the charm of a lot of books. Like, you read The Lord of the Rings, you read Moby Dick, or you read like The Stand or Salem's Lot or something, like a very, very big novel, and a lot of people get frustrated at the level of detail, but I feel like that's part of the charm of a lot of those books, is because they're detailed and you get lost in the detail, and it just it becomes another world. I think that's like what books are supposed to be. It's supposed to be a reflection of reality, and if you have more space to describe like characters and a setting and everything, I feel like, and tell the story, I feel like it gets closer to reality than what it would be if you just took out all those parts. But anyways, that's why I feel like it should at least be 7.5 rating. Additionally, the idea is fantastic, and again, I think it's cool because it really makes you think about what would happen if something on this scale actually were to occur. I think it provokes your brain into being skeptical of the government and stuff like that, and what an actual response to something like this would be. I do agree that it does get a little fantastical towards the end, and I believe it is definitely far away from a horror novel, but I don't think it was originally written to be a horror novel. I feel like that's a problem with some of the people that criticize it, is they're expecting a horror novel, and I don't believe that's what this is. So 7.5 out of 10, and I would say I want to say 4 stars, just because I think it was really great. I think maybe like 3.8 stars, 3.8 or 4 stars, because it does. I can understand that like there is a little bit of a drudge through it, even towards the end. Like once Larry Underwood and Glenn Bateman have been blown up, the Trash Can Man is blown up, Randall Flagg is gone. There's really nothing left to be done except for them to return to Boulder and live their lives. even like their walk through the mountain, it is still a bit of a drudge, even though it's kind of like they just have to survive the storm and get back home. It could have been written in slightly less expanded form there, but so I mean I can't understand some of the criticism, but I did really enjoy the book, and I would recommend that you read it regardless of the criticism and my own criticisms against the book. I really do think it was very good. And yeah, I think it was really great. I think there are a lot of characters. There's a very, very good amount of depth and detail in the book. If you don't want to read one this big, or you have an issue with if you have an issue with the length, then just read the abridged. I don't think you're gonna miss that much, besides a little bit more detail from the characters. So if you're really set upon reading a shorter version, then I would read the abridged, and that way maybe you won't be as disdainful of the book. But I think it's ironic too, because I saw someone in like the comment section of a book review talking of The Stand, talking about like there are better apocalyptic books, and I'm like, there may be, you know, shorter versions. There was one book that was recommended to me that's like The Stand, but it's like a short story or a novella. It's like 98 pages or something. And someone said it's like Diet The Stand, and I kind of agree with that. I feel like, yes, it is a big book, but I feel like the commitment is worth it because of the depth of the characters. But I can see why some people would drop off towards the end, that they just don't like it. But in my opinion, it is very good. So 7.5 out of 10, 3.8 out of 5 stars, or 4 out of 5 stars. Very, very good book. Definitely read it if you would like, and everything I told you sounds interesting. But if you don't want to read a super long book that isn't necessarily a horror novel, then I would skip this one and maybe read something like The Shining or It, or something like that is a little bit more, or Misery, that's more along the this is a horror novel straight up. But I believe a lot of the criticism is a little bit harsh, considering how well the characters developed. That's my opinion. That's the best way to state that, I think, in my mind. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please leave any comments, questions, disagreements that you have in the comments. I'd like to hear them. And let me know what you thought of the book if you've read it. I think it's really cool. I think it's really good. And it kind of feels like an accomplishment to read it. It's like kind of like reading like Moby Dick, or I don't know, something like that. Just like a large novel. It just takes a while, and it's good. Honestly, one more thing. I like that it is long, because it's kind of like reading several books in one. Because the middle, I think, is separated into like book 2. So I think a lot of the problems people have with this book is book 2 onwards. They like book 1, the first part of the novel. But that's all I'll say about it. I really appreciate you all watching.